All right, so this last section is going to be about bone repair. So when you break a bone or have a fracture, this is going to be the process that's going to take place in order for bone to repair itself. Okay, and so we're mainly going to be talking about fractures. Okay, and this is just another word for breaks. And there are different types of breaks that you can have. The main things that are important are position of the bone ends after the fracture. Okay, and so you can have either a non-displaced, so basically it's broken, but it's still in the same spot that it's supposed to be, or it could be displaced. So then that's obviously going to be kind of a more serious fracture. You're also going to have completeness. Of break. So this can either be complete, which obviously will be pretty severe, or incomplete, which probably can also be very severe depending on how it happens. And then the last part has to do with the skin. So whether the bone ends break skin. Okay, so you can either have an open, which means that yes, the bone does go through the skin, or it can be closed, which it's broken, but there's no actual bone sticking out of skin. Okay, and so when bone is going to be repaired, we can talk just briefly about what the doctor will do. And so for treatment, they first need to do something called reduction. Okay, which is realignment of the bone. Oops, forgot a G. Of the broken bones. Okay. And then what they do is they immobilize it so that nothing moves and the body can start taking over and repair itself. Okay. So there are 4 main steps of repair, and I have some pictures of what this is going to look like. Okay, so the first step is going to be the formation of a hematoma. Okay, so we'll have 1. So hematoma formation. Okay, and so the torn vessels. Okay, you have the torn, it could be the periosteum. You also have the broken bone. The torn vessels result in bleeding. Okay, and then that turns into a clot. Okay, so that would be in this area, the hematoma. Okay, after that happens, we then move on to the next step, which is when a callus is going to start to form. Okay, the original callus is going to be made out of fibrocartilage. So fibrocartilaginous callus forms. Okay, and so what happens at fibroblasts and chondrocytes invade the fracture. Fracture site and secrete cartilaginous matrix. Okay, that ultimately calcifies. Now, this initial callus connection is going to help connect the bone back together. Okay, obviously it's not bone tissue, so that there's going to be more steps. So we'll say callus connects broken bones And at this point, we call this a soft callus. It'll eventually turn into a hard callus, okay? The next step is going to be when a bony callus forms, okay? So now we're having replacement of this fibrocartilaginous tissue that is now going to turn into bony cartilage. Okay, so bony callus forms, okay? And then we have within the fibrocartilaginous tissue, osteoblasts begin forming spongy bone. Okay? When it does this, we now call this a hard callus. Okay. The last step is going to be when bone remodeling occurs. So you've had bone replaced in there, but the bone may not be kind of in the form that it needs to be in, so it needs to be remodeled. So we're saying bone remodeling occurs. Okay, and this can take several months. Kind of depends on the bone and location and the severity. The bony callus is remodeled. So that excess material on the shaft or any location on the diaphysis and the medullary cavity is removed. Okay, so anything that's kind of excess, so if you go back to this previous step, you can see that there's, oops, sorry, wrong one. You can see that there's actually bone in here. Well, the medullary cavity is also running this direction, so this is eventually going to need to be gone. There also is some excess bone material on the outside, and so that needs to be shaved down, and this is going to be remodeled, okay? And so you're going to end up doing that remodeling process. You might have a little bit of a bump, kind of like a scar left on there, but overall the shape is kind of back to what it looked like before. All right, just a little bit about different types of fractures. So there can be lots of different types. So we can have kind of, this is a pretty severe type of fracture, so comminuted. And you can see that there's multiple different broken bones and they've broken multiple pieces. So bone fragments into 3 or more pieces. This is something that happens in people that are old or have very brittle bones. And so you can imagine that this is probably going to be a difficult one for it to repair. This is a compression one. So if you have a bone that's crushed, this is something that also happens in kind of older people or anyone that has osteoporosis, or if you're subjected to extreme trauma, such as like a fall. And so you can have a crushed vertebra. Another type is going to be a spiral, where the break is going to kind of go in a twisting direction. So we have a ragged break occurs when excessive twisting force are applied to a bone. This is something that happens often in sports injuries, because if you're moving different directions very quickly, and you can have kind of this happen. This other type of fracture is epiphyseal type, where you have kind of the epiphysis separates from the diaphysis along the epiphyseal plate. So this is going to occur where the cartilage cells are dying and calcification of matrix is occurring. Okay, so you can have that take place. This last set, this is a depressed, so kind of having the broken bone pressed inward. So on the skull, they often find these types of skull fractures on, ancient bones, and you could tell like they were hit by a club on the head or something like that. And then this last type is called a green stick. This is something that happens a lot in little kids. So this is when the bone breaks, but not completely. And it's why they call it a green stick is because if you ever tried to break a green stick, like an actual thing from a plant, it often is difficult to break all the way through because it has, you know, it's pretty tough material. And so kids that are kind of have bones that are a little more flexible than adults will often have these types of fractures. Okay, so that is going to be the end of this set.